You were saying she starts to...
Yeah, exactly. She has this periods where she's just developing something completely new. Right now, it's mainly her emotions and stubbornness. That's at least how it feels. But then because they have so much going on inside them, they wake up at night because they are just so
What's the
irritated.
process?
Exactly. And the second thing she has is she gets teeth, which is extremely painful. So her current hobby is to wake up in between 1 and 3 and to stay awake for 2 hours or more.
That's a good hobby to have,
Yeah,
actually.
I enjoy that a lot. So I sometimes sit there with her like 2:30 in the morning, trying to read a book and not fall asleep. And she's like, "Yeah, it's so nice." So, but the thing is, and that's the most beautiful thing that I think is about nature and about having children, is that you're just so incredibly in love with them, and they are so incredibly cute that no matter what they do, it's just okay. It just feels absolutely okay to sit there at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I think you take a lot more shit than you would take from other people.
Yes. They always make this joke that toddlers are like drunk people, which is actually true. It is, because they come up with really crazy ideas and you have to watch them because they just come up with things where you're like, how, and they hit you and they scream at you and they're just like extremely irrational. And you're just like, okay, I still love you. It's amazing.
But I mean,
Never experience.
I know it's a bit controversial to say, right? But there's a fundamental like difference between girls and boys also, that the shit that they come up with.
Yes.
And I'm not saying all, obviously. You can never say all.
No.
I know actually that from my wife, her sister was more, let's say, the tomboyish type of girl, a bit more roughhousing and these type of things. But it's so funny that you can just, like you tell a mom who only had girls, it's a known story. One of my friends, he used to live in Amsterdam, and he was cleaning his car. And he'd been cleaning his car because at the time he had 2 kids. He now has 3 kids. And he'd been cleaning his car for like 2 hours or something. He had the trunk open. He was ready. Like his youngest comes with like 2 hands of sand. Like, and he said he doesn't even know where he got the sand, because he's like, we're in a parking lot. Like, where the hell did he get the sand? And the kid just walks up to like the back and he just like throws the sand like straight through the car, right? And it just goes like, no, like, what are you doing? and he told the story, and there's like some parents with girls, and they're like, yeah, like my girl would never think of that. Like they wouldn't even think of doing that.
Yeah, my girl is not like that.
Yeah, well, there's exceptions. There's exceptions.
When she's angry, she throws everything everywhere. And if she's angry with me, she tries to bite me.
Ah, nice.
And she's so she's like yesterday she wants to grab something random like a flower and wanted to destroy it, and I said no, and she's like, ah. So you're like, okay, I'm happy how good you're in handling your emotions. So it's super interesting, but this is true. My sister has 3 boys, and it's I'm so impressed how they handle it, because they are all super high energy and they are very rough, and it's definitely a huge difference to girls. I mean, there are, of course, other, let's say, kinder and more intense kids in any form and sense. But
there's a good range.
Yeah, let's say there was a reason why I always wanted to have girls, because I was like, first of all, I'm a woman, so I can understand them better, which makes it easier for me. Very egoistic in front of my husband, but still. And I also said it's like they have a different kind of intensity. I think I was always scared to have a boy because I was scared to not be able to cope with the trouble that you would cause. So I'm happy that we had a girl. I was just like, hey, to start off with, to make the first experiences, I enjoy the fact that I have a daughter, which is very similar to me. So she has a high energy, but still I somehow feel like it's easy to, because of that,
you can channel it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, tell that to my mom. She had 4 boys.
Yeah, my mother had 4 girls. And then she thought it's not going to be that bad, but we were making like physical fights like boys did at home. And that's why always we
I
didn't fight.
think that's better.
Yeah.
I'm not promoting violence, by the way.
No, but there's a study. There's a study, because my husband's telling me this all the time. There's a study that if children play rough, they build more confidence because of that. So it is actually not a bad thing to, you don't have to overdo it, but I'm also playing rough with her, my husband does, right? Because it's building their confidence. They feel like they're not scared if they're falling. My daughter, her new thing is to climb up a bit higher on the couch and just let herself fall down to the back, where all the other mothers in the room were like, why? Oh, you, and I was like, let her do it. If she enjoys it, it's no problem. And it's
sure, it's herself, she knows.
Yeah, and I think
lesson.
it's also just I'm happy that she's just not scared, and I just want her to kind of stay that way, instead of trying to make.
Plus, you actually learn physical limits.
Yeah, right, very fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and at that age, like, how far do you really fall?
Yeah, I mean,
right? Like,
that's why.
I mean, if you or I would, like, you're also pretty tall, right?
Reasonably, I think maybe 176. Yes.
Oh, okay.
If I'm still that tall, I didn't.
Oh, you think it's already that time?
I hope not.
Yeah, but if you fall from 176, like your momentum is quite different, obviously. Yeah, that's not great. But if like a toddler falls, it's kind of like, yeah, of course it hurts, but are they really going to,
I mean, in the end of the day, their bones are way softer. The whole the structures are also softer. So if I see what she's doing every day and she's falling every day, nothing happens. So I mean, I think in the end of the day, they are quite robust. And anyway, we discussed it with my husband beforehand. We want her to be confident and to just try things and then learn instead of over protecting. I'm definitely not a helicopter mom. That I can tell for sure.
Don't be. So who has time for that?
Yeah.
Also, I think, like, if you look back and of course, like, environments change as well. Like, there's a lot more people, there's a lot more cars, there's a lot more traffic. So certain things, like some of the rules of the game definitely have changed. But I think, yeah, like if I think back, like our parents, I mean, obviously they, like also didn't want a helicopter around. So they just, like my brother was already, but he's 2 years older. He was able to roam a bit. They put, like, when I was a toddler, they just, if they had to work on the weekend, on the house, do stuff, paint. My dad was building a gaube, like, with his father. They just put a leash on me and put me, like, pinned me in the garden. It's like, okay, this is the range of motion you have, It's like, who cares?
I think it's as long as you have to have the possibility to be also yourselves as parents, and you need to be able to do things, because if you just sit there and just watch a child because that's the only task that you are there for, you lose yourself.
I think you lose your mind.
Yeah, exactly. I would fully agree to that. I had that quite early when because
you lost your mind.
Yeah, very early in my life. But then I found it again, which was nice.
Okay.
And then but I couldn't do this. I mean, I'm character-wise, I always feel like I need to do something to learn, to grow, to explore and all of that. And I could never sit at home and my only task would be to watch another human being. That's plain. I mean, I know other women are different and I'm happy for them. I'm absolutely not that way. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I felt this. So my relationship with my husband and what we were doing was getting better at the time when we could start to just be ourselves again and do stuff together with her, go into the garden, go outside shopping together with her, and not that someone always had to stay at home to take care and so on. So this freedom and flexibility, I think, is so human and so deep in our nature that you should never give this up, no matter what, right? So
yeah, I think so too. I mean, so Christina and I, we had my brother's kids one weekend, all three of them at the same time. And at the end of the weekend, I think my brother and his wife, they went for a wedding, I believe in Poland. So they dropped off the kids and of course discussed it beforehand. It's not like they rang the doorbell and they're like, here you go, enjoy, have fun. This is a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago, and they dropped the kids at the end of the weekend. They picked up the kids again, and I looked at Christina. I was like, did we even talk to each other this weekend, or did we only speak through the kids? Like, were they our medium of communication with each other for like an entire weekend?
Yeah.
And that's also the point. I was like, okay, like you really have to grow into this and set some rules for yourself, for your relationship, for your own sanity. And that's when I really thought like, oh my God, like I have so much more understanding for my parents. They had four absolute idiots, just running around punching stuff, it's like breaking things. And I think there must have been a few years. I'm not sure how much Germans can relate, but there must have been a few years in my dad's life that every weekend he was fixing at least something on one of our bikes. Like, and that was half his Saturday. He was just fixing bikes. That because we were doing wheelies and like crashing. Then we had this computer game where we, like Road Rage or something, or I don't know what it was called, but it's like you're on a motorbike, you can slap other people or something. It was a stupid video game. And we mimicked that on our bikes, of course.
Yeah, because that's important.
It's important. You need to kick each other off your bikes on the road.
But that's part of being child. It's like,
yeah. And I just think back in like my poor dad, like he was working, and this is also where his career is basically, like he's at a point in the career, like in his career where he's working, 10, 11, 12-hour days at least. And so he comes home, he's tired, he eats, pretty much goes to bed. If he's lucky, he can read like the newspaper or speak to my mom. And then, on the weekend, here we go again. Got to fix the bikes of my kids who have no respect for my free time. It's like,
but I think the beauty about this is like, it's, I mean, I feel it myself. I usually also work quite a bit, and still I'm so much looking forward every afternoon, evening to spend time with her, even if even if I have to do something for her, which you usually have to because your child always have a demand, and you're getting so much energy from them that whatever you thought you would be your limit is you're going so much beyond. So that's absolutely incredible. But it's good that we're testing it now.
Yeah, I think it has, like AI really has its own mind. And maybe because it knows me well, it constantly turns to me. I don't know. It's like, I really hope it stays this way. I'll turn this so that I can actually see it if it goes wrong. This chair also has a mind of its own.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
And that was also AI. That was a ghost.
Everything is
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, it's a great segue. Romina.
Yeah.
Do I pronounce your name right?
That's cool.
Romina?
Yeah, Romina is completely fine.
Romina. Tell us, what do you do for E.ON?
Actually, I am having a quite broad responsibility. So I'm responsible for data and AI strategy, where we define the North Star and where we want to go. Then I'm also responsible for data and AI governance, which is kind of the framework that we are defining to have the right direction and ensuring that we are, achieving our North Star, if you want to say, set the scene and speed up the process. And then I do have enterprise data platforms, which is then where we apply our own ideas and standards directly in technology, and we're implementing it and rolling it out to the organization. And obviously, I'm also then doing the operations of the platform. So I basically see if what we have defined in the North Star, when we implement it, does it actually result into what we wanted it to result, or are there maybe things we didn't consider yet that need to go back to the strategy, so that I somehow have this quite nice end-to-end view on the whole data and AI topics, and I can influence them from various different perspectives, which I enjoy a lot.
For which part of E.ON?
All
E.ON. So also infrastructure, basically across.
Exactly.
Across all of the business lines.
Exactly. We do have basically 4 major segments, which is energy markets, energy networks, energy retail, that's customer solutions, and we do have energy infrastructure solutions, which is ICE. And of course, there are some areas where we are more engaged and there are others where we are less engaged. That depends a bit on the organization and so on, because I also am just one human being. So, there's
Really?
70,000 employees. I cannot talk to all of them.
Could make it a goal.
Yeah, if that would be maybe my next step. I think I have talked to a lot, let's say it that way, inside of E.ON already. But we are usually working with those where we feel like there's the best connection and we can create the most value for them. And this is what we are targeting. But of course, for the strategy and everything, we are talking to everyone in every business unit, but in different levels of intensity.
Like you've been with E.ON for well over 10 years, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Almost 15.
15 years. Okay, there you go. So was it your first job?
Yeah, exactly. So I've my job working starts earlier. I'm working since I was 15, and always loved work. I was always a workaholic. I was already working when I was doing my kind of high school already 4 to 7 times per week, and I was always working after school, and I always enjoyed it. So I was pretty much used to work 2 to 3 jobs before I started to have my first real one inside of E.ON.
You mean your first professional paying job, let's say, not like side jobs?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I always had like several things going on at the same time, and then always also did something like being the speaker of all the students and let's say be very active in that space. So this was the first couple of years when I just went still to school and studied. And then already in 2010, I have done or started the dual study because I knew I'm a very practical person. I really like to get things done. And I cannot just sit around and study without really having the practical use of my knowledge.
The German dweller.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And this is how my journey in E.ON already started. So it was actually quite interesting. That's where you see I'm a super people person. My original idea was that I wanted to go because I was speaking English, Italian, and German already fluently, and I wanted to learn Spanish and French. So I wanted to go as an au pair to France and to Spain. And my father basically said, you apply for some of the steward studies. If you're not taken anywhere, I will finance you the whole part, and you're going outside and you're exploring the world. And then, obviously, because I'm not stupid, I on purpose failed most of the interviews and all this kind of stuff because I was still like, in the age where you do that on purpose. And then there was this one with Avacon. And the woman who was responsible for organizing everything was so extremely kind that I just couldn't. I just couldn't misbehave because I felt like it would have been just so disrespectful for the effort she has put to make me feel comfortable and make me feel welcome and all that. And then they took me, and I had to move within 10 days to 500 kilometers away from home. I didn't know anyone there. Still was a very, very good choice for me. But it was her. It was
where was home?
Home was kind of here. It is not too far from here. It's like in Kempen am Niederrhein, so close to the border of Netherlands. And then I went to the very deep Eastern Germany, where they were still having a fence around the home for the kind of foreigners to protect them from the people. So this was the contrast.
It's like in the football stadium, like where the other team, like the families are sitting, the fence around it.
Yeah. So it was, that's how the journey already started. That was 2010. And since then, I've been having a lot of different roles. I was in controlling, I was in supply chain. I always liked to work with numbers. And now since almost 7.5 years, building the whole data practice in the main. I did the data foundation first, so data management, data governance, data architecture, and now AI as the next one to put my power in.
Since when?
AI, I only have the responsibility for strategy and governance since beginning of this year. But I have been obviously contributing beforehand and have been part some years ago in the of the data science division. And I have data science as a background myself. So I've studied data science, and by design, you're aware of the topics and you always consider them, have them on your mind.
Yeah, well, it depends, of course, what kind of student you were.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah.
Okay, cool. I actually prepared a couple of questions before we went into this, because obviously, let's take the topic of data. you can extend the topic of data to AI, but you can extend it to many, many different, actually, other fields. And E.ON being actually quite a broad organization in the sense that, sure, in the end, the product is very easy. I mean, it is like, for conceptually, it's a very easy product. But you do have quite a number of business lines and quite, let's say, a broad responsibility. Plus, I actually wanted to ask you, looking from a data and maybe AI perspective, you're not just looking at the business lines, but you're also looking at the employee themselves and their way of working. Is this something that is also a topic at the moment for you?
Possibly has never been more on the focus than it is right now, because if you consider we are doing AI since at least 7 years since I'm there. We started data science about 7 years ago when I joined the organization, and we could never leverage as much from it as we were actually intending to. And obviously, employee efficiency is one of the core things that you try to support with AI. But we have just detected that we have a lot of great ideas, but we don't know how to do software development and to do DevOps. So as for almost all companies, 80% of the projects fail because of poor data quality, before in complying to regulations.
Legacy system.
Exactly. So there's so many things that happen to us as much as they happen to anyone else in big corporates. And now we are going for a product operating model. And the product basis or the product operating model says you need to be as close to your customers as possible. In our cases, our customers are the employees of E.ON, because these are the guys working with our internal products, right?
Yeah.
So I never wanted to be closer to them than I am right now, to really understand what really harms you every day from doing your job, and then to find scalable but still pragmatic solutions to them so that we can make their life easier. And this is why I would say, from that perspective, and there's of course other things we focus on, but from that perspective, employees and talking to them and listening and understanding what the challenges are incredibly important.
What are some patterns that emerge?
I mean, first of all, I would say we do have a better awareness now for data, in that they understand, okay, I have an impact on how good I can work or not, because it depends on what data I'm using and how responsible I feel for it. But still, this topic of data ownership, of people really understanding that if I do something wrong now, that will hit 40, 50 people down the road. And I need to take responsibility to ensure here, when I, for example, create data, which is usually when our, let's say, engineers in the field, that they do something that has a real impact on our business performance every time they do it. And this is still, if you remember, like, imagine that this is a guy going out in the field and being an electrician. It's not the first thing you would actually think of. And this is something where we see that there's a better awareness, but it still is a kind of a big struggle to ensure that we do have the quality right from the very beginning in our data. But the cool thing is now people want to work with data more and more. So they want to actually spend time with it. They want to have access to it. And we have the first time situations where someone else also saying, oh, I have power over my data. So if someone wants to have it, I can say no, which can be positive or negative, right?
Yeah,
but
of course.
to just have this
Can always
mindset,
be weaponized.
Exactly. But to just see that they out of sudden feel that data is not just information. Data is also an asset that they can manage and that they can protect in a way, right? Is super interesting to see. And of course, you see that we do have a huge appliance of GenAI, and there's huge hype around that. And latest now, because of this, everyone wants to have data and wants to chat with it and wants to try something, and they don't need to code anymore. They can generate code, so they would try that. So it's
Let's I do have an opinion about that, but let's not get into vibe coding too much.
Yeah.
I would also not suggest it for a company like E.ON.
No.
If you're already bad at developing software, this is not the solution.
No, definitely not. It's also nothing that we are supporting, but it happens.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, it just happens. This is human beings. They don't ask us always for the approval of trying Claude and see if they can write an SQL statement and be like, wow, cool, this works. I don't even know what is written there, but I get a result. So it happens because they're humans and they try and they want to explore.
Where do you think this awareness for data is coming from. How do you see trends? Like, has this been going on for a while now, or?
I mean, it depends on the parts of the organization. So when I look into the people who actively work with data, they are aware because they feel the pain. But this was most on the operative level, and these are data scientists, data engineers, software engineers, sometimes also business analysts, process responsibles. Those who feel the pain when they don't have the right quality in data, they have been aware for a while and they have been trying to push it. And they were never really broadly successful. They were usually successful in the project or in some domain of their organization, but they couldn't really, convince the top management, for example, that they should now force everyone, or at least give a note that we should focus stronger on this. But now with the new trend that is coming from GenAI, it is so hyped, and it is even more hyped than AI was already 7 years ago. But this time, it made a fundamental change. And I always take this example. I'm doing this 7.5 years now, and I'm with top management now every week. And I'm discussing with the top management about data models and why we need them. I'm discussing with the top management about that we need a data council to decide fundamentally what we want to do around data. And this all happened in the last 1.5 or 2 years, right? So it was really, really impressive.
Commercialization of let's say the transformer models is also something that's created awareness with management.
Absolutely, yes. And I think it is obviously the change curve is taking time if it comes about fundamental transformations. And I love transformations. I'm quite, I would say, also experienced in change management. And I know that things take time. And it's just natural. And I remember last Tuesday, we were sitting with our Victoria Osatnik. She's in the board of E.ON SE, responsible for digitization, innovation, and in-house consulting. And she was asking for the data council. I never had to pitch it to her. And this was for me like the moment where we show off that we have taken more time. And that was my approach to do a proper change management. Give the people the time they need to get where you want them to be, instead of trying to force it through governance, to force it through whatever comes to your mind. I don't know. And this was such a rewarding moment because I just thought like there's no better way in doing things than if she arrives there by herself in her thinking. So it was just really, really, really cool because I've kind of waited for this moment for like 7 years, and it was just nice to see that it is a matter of it's a marathon doing such a transformation, and you need to be willing. Yeah, exactly. And you need to be really willing to run this marathon and not think that you can do this. Oh, I can do it in 2 years because everyone else was stupid. No, it's most likely not the case. So yeah,
could be the case. The point is, of course, you do need to change, or you want to change an entire organization, and it needs to start somewhere. You can approach it grassroots or top down, or like whatever way you choose. But in the end, people need to be convinced.
Yeah,
and not just say that they're convinced. They need to truly be convinced. And I don't know how you see this, but what you oftentimes see is that now, especially in the last 2 years, like we've been also at it for approximately, my current company, we've oh my God, we're almost 5 years. We're almost 5 years. But even before that, the company that I set up, fundamentally working with data and models, basically. Not photo models, like data models.
both is nice.
No, both are nice, sure. And now the last 2 years, you do see also top management really pushing for like what are at least the possibilities of AI, right? It's one of the reasons we actually, we work with a major European government, like with our tooling, and this would have never been possible 2 years ago. Like, it's just not possible. They would have looked at it, they would have shown interest, but the decision power wouldn't have been there. And not the German government, by the way, but you could have imagined that yourself, I guess.
That's right.
That will take another 15 years. Maybe in the year 2070, like.
Yeah, then you can target them again.
Yeah. My grandchildren, they will. But what I do see is that some fundamental things are still not in order, because a lot of organizations have now jumped over a couple of stages that are not thought through. And I'll just take an example, and I hope that you can relate to it. Let's take E.ON as an example from a consumer perspective. Imagine that my bill is wrong. Yeah? Simple data. This is simple customer data. The organization is incapable, literally incapable of correcting it. So you will receive 6 months, 7 months, you will receive, Mahnung, and you can write, you can call, but it's in like the organization itself is incapable of saying like, hey, okay, there are some numbers that need to be corrected somewhere, and you will see that the fundamental, let's say, structure around proper data, organization, process, right? Okay, so like this, the invoicing process, but also the reminders. Then maybe, like closing off a consumer from energy because, like they have not paid, 6 or 7 months. I don't know like what the real rules are internally, obviously. But you see that like process, organization, and fundamental process around data is not there. And the organization, a lot of organizations are saying, yes, but GenAI. And I don't know what your experience with this is, but it seems that, people or organizations are looking to skip a large number of steps. And I was wondering if looking from your perspective also, because I mean, in a sense, you're also a policymaker, or maybe not even in a sense, you are a policymaker within this organization. Like, well, how do you experience this?
So it depends a bit on the people we are talking to. Interestingly, the first time that I had someone really telling me, I don't need to take care about data structures and I don't need to care about data quality because GenAI is going to do it. I was at a conference in Hamburg IT and Strategietage, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was just standing there.
Not on the 1st of April?
No. And it was a CIO roundtable.
Oui.
So it was, and I was completely shocked, but I was also happy that the statement came up because I needed to demystify that. I mean, I'm working on data foundations for 7 years on the fundament. And of course, there are cases where if you don't need accuracy, if you don't need to have things which are reliable, but it's more about, for example, creating agendas, job profiles, article drafts, whatever. Yes, GenAI makes a difference, and that's cool. I'm using it every day, and I enjoy it. Yeah, creating pictures, funny pictures, and all this kind of stuff. It's fun. I do it. I use it as a sparring partner for developing ideas. I do it a lot. But the second you need to have a result that is absolutely accurate, that will never be done by deep learning, because you can't understand what is happening, and you can't ensure that if you ask the question 10, 15 times, that the results will always be the correct ones. So, in fact, yeah, maybe you know more than I do, but at this moment in time where we are technology-wise, I couldn't secure that if my sales manager is typing in a question without knowing really what is below it.
That's the point. The probabilistic nature of the actual transformer model leaves, let's say, leeway in the answer.
Exactly. It depends on the prompting, of course. And if you skill them up in that, you might get more accurate. But if you compare the skill level of the people to the technology where it is, I couldn't really put my hand into fire saying, when you ask it for the concrete number, how much you have sold in a specific region on a specific day in a specific year, that you would get 10 times the same answer.
You would need to set like actual controls for that, button sliders, drop downs, actually the inputs in the end, creating the prompt, creating the outputs.
Yeah.
You can steer, of course, but your fundamental data still needs to be clean.
Exactly. And this is another point. The large language models are 3 times more effective and faster if they are actually working on structured data, and structured data doesn't need to be like in a way it's really structured as in a relational database, but it has a common way of defining semantics. And what I always say, this 25-year-old idea of the enterprise data model, which was very old school and not so relevant for quite a long time before we had these models, gets more and more relevant again, because you can use GenAI to generate those models, and you can then, of course, you need to double check with the human beings, and that takes time, but you can define those data models, which are allowing you then to have higher accuracy, which are allowing you to have a higher performance in your models, less training cost, all of that. So I think still
Less
this
hardware cost actually running
exactly.
the questions. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is why in the end of the day, if you want to scale it, I mean, seriously use it in your business every single day, you don't come around data foundations. It's always the same thing. And also, a GenAI can, maybe not GenAI, but AI in general, can detect, for example, data quality issues, but only to a specific degree. Sometimes you need to have this very specific domain knowledge to be able
There's
to
plenty of structure you can.
Yeah.
But if the fundamental number is wrong,
Yeah.
or you're not giving it access to the fundamental correct numbers, then there's no way of detecting it.
Yeah.
Because it will be taken for granted.
Exactly.
What are you very excited about? Like if you look at these, because now we're really talking, grassroots and top down. So you will have the fundamental, let's say, understanding of data. And I guess if interest is really there, you can at least explain and with tangible examples, like, look, this is what can go wrong if we don't work on our data. Is there something that really excites you, like when you're thinking of the energy sector, like maybe predictive maintenance, or like specific fields that you say it might be a tiny application, but it really, either from a technological standpoint or from a personal standpoint, like something that really, gets you going?
I mean, this is not very, very like personal for me, but I really into capital markets and mergers and acquisitions, and into understanding how you can bring companies together, have them scale together and grow together and all that. And what if I think about us in 5 to 7 years, I think we will have an enterprise data model that helps us scale anything we want to. It can be our in-house software we are developing, like this. You're scaling it to all business units at almost no cost. Yeah, like this, you can integrate a new company into our organization because we have one defined language. So what I have to do is to take what they have done in the past, map it to us, and like this, they can use anything that we have created in the organization at an incredibly lower cost, right? So for me, what I get excited about is how we can grow and how we can also get new businesses in, think about new business models, think about a completely different way of working, just if we have our data right. And this is what really makes me the most excited, and what I put all my energy in for so many years, because I know if we once got this right, this company is going to be, there's no competitor out there who can compete with us. We can even start competing with scale-ups because we are cheap and fast and we know what we are doing. So we could be in a completely different position than we are right now. And this is what my vision is, where I'm always thinking about.
I wouldn't necessarily equate E.ON with cheap and fast at this moment in
That's
time.
exactly it, yeah. And this is exactly
if
my
I
point.
think of it like that's,
yeah,
not where they stand today.
Exactly. But imagine, for example, when we would have a proper customer data model, then we would see that you're giving feedback through a different channel than where you get the invoice from, because it's two different systems, right? You see. But we would
tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And you would see that, and we could, without a big deal, have them communicate with each other. So when next time you're calling someone and you're saying there's a problem, theoretically, even the call center agent would be able to correct the data in the system, even though he has officially that's not the system he's working in, but it's another one. So when we have this layer where we start to connect the dots, we can have a completely different way of working. And this is my motivation.
That's data governance in the end. That's proper data governance.
And architecture.
And architecture, exactly.
Because that's the technical part of it.
Of course.
Yeah.
The actual access, like who can what. But the whole point is, that's before you start talking about AI.
Yeah, and with AI, it gets way faster and more efficient to do it. This is how I see it. This is why I get so excited about that.
It's actually where I start, like on the premise of which I started, well, Contracto in the end. Let's say I worked for a corporate, yeah, a mythical corporate. It doesn't exist, obviously. And we acquired a large, different organization, and we had to integrate that organization into ours, like massive organization, right? Like approximately the size of ours. So quite the acquisition. And what I saw is that on the most mundane levels, you'd have to spend millions on Deloitte, junior associates, just 50 of them sitting in a room, combing through your products, combing through the terms and conditions, combing through the, let's say, all the base systems, just to see like, okay, what aligns, what doesn't align, who do we need to write letters. Yes, this company was based in Germany, so they were still writing letters. Like who needs to, like, where do the contracts need to go, like these type of things. And they were just blowing millions and millions and millions. Like we're talking like proper money, obviously, and Deloitte's very happy with it.
That's how they earn money. Yeah,
it's a good business model. And I was at the time, and this is a long time ago. I'm old. This is approximately 7 years ago, and I was just thinking, I was looking at it, and I was responsible for that part. And I just like, like with a proper data model, with a bit of AI. And at the time, obviously, transformer models were nowhere powerful as they are now. And I just thought, like, this could literally be done in hours instead of, with 50 people half a year.
Exactly.
And because it's the base of data quality, of matching, of semantic matching, these type of things. And yeah, that's actually where I started. Like on that basis, I started Contracto. And so it's funny that you say like, scaling, organizational scaling your products, your actual customer organization, like these type of things. That's pretty much been my driver. But I do have to say, it's not the sexiest side of data. It's not, well, when we tell people like what we do, people are like, yeah, sounds important, but of course it's not, it's not the drone of Bayer.
Exactly.
That is, flying and taking like high-res images of crops to see where they need to, like fight fungus on a plant. With the help of machine vision. Like that's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like people can visualize it. That's amazing. Or there's so many applications that people get really excited about. And I also thought like, definitely in an energy company, you will have some really cool technology, or like at least some vision for some things when you're thinking about, like the actual nets, like, or the actual physicality of it.
We have several cases. So if we compare it a little bit to what you've just described, for example, we are using drones for it's called vegetation management. So very simple. We have overhead lines. Everyone sees them. I always say this is what you hate when you look into the landscape, and then there's the cables.
Really?
So
I like it.
I think some people still have this feeling that I love it as well, but I'm also very long in energy industry. So if there are trees next to it, we have to cut them, obviously, to ensure that the cables are fine. And before that, it was done by people. And now we can use drones which are flying, and they are just sending the pictures. And we are analyzing the pictures, and we basically can see if there's a problem or not. If there is, we are sending a helicopter to cut them back. Yeah. If not, it just goes on as is. So this is an application where we can use drones, for example, for that specific topic that is in Sweden already, because it's a common problem there, super actively used. So that's something that is definitely quite cool. Then we do have a second case where we use a robot to actually do some repair works in the substations, where it's something reasonably easy to do. Yeah, but of course, if we didn't have a robot like that, people have to go out and do it. And now we have seen it. It was on a lot of our conferences. There was it looked like a dog. It was really cool. And it could just do some basic work in our grid. So this is more on where we're using machines. Then another case, what we are actually doing is to install sensors in the grid wherever we can, as much as possible. to be able to actually really steer the grid in real time. And again, here, it allows us to have a way more efficient way, for example, to ensure that when everyone is now pumping energy into the grid and we see that there's too much load, that we can react to it very quickly and automatically without, at the moment, you have to imagine if we see that there's a potential peak, someone is driving out and is shutting down a part of the grid or is reducing it so that we don't get a problem in the load itself. While in the future with sensors and with the IoT, we can do this automatically. So, and these are just three. There's so many things, so many things where we are applying AI in E.ON. Another maybe that is
I mean,
not...
E.ON is in all major European countries. Is
Yeah,
there
17, exactly.
Do you see, like, when you look at the European countries, do you see that some countries are already further ahead? You said like Sweden was already using this technology because the trees were a lot of,
Yeah.
lots of trees in Sweden, obviously. Lots of area where people are not living. Do you see that certain countries other than Germany are further in specific fields? And is there technology that you then adapt back to, let's say, its home country?
I mean, where we are way further than Germany is with smart meters in UK and Romania. I mean, when I was still in supply chain, which is a lot of years back, we already did the tender for UK smart meters. That was about 10 years ago. Now we are starting in Germany. So you can imagine that in the UK, with the data that we have and with the information that we have received, we could completely differently analyze the basically consumption of our customers or of the users of the grid. Is not like direct customers, but it's the users of the grid. And of course, the experience that we got from there can be, of course, also used in Germany, because now we are getting the same data, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And for example, in Italy, we are quite far when it comes to future energy, home, e-mobility, and so on. So definitely there are differences between the countries, and we do have different priorities and use cases because, for example, as you just said, Sweden has a lot of trees with areas where a lot of people are, and there are not a lot of people living, while maybe in Italy, this is not such a big problem, right? So it depends also a bit on the country and in the end there, if the use cases are really relevant for everyone else. But for example, the smart meter topic is a good example where as soon as you have a smart meter installed in your country, it gets relevant and you can share the knowledge.
Was it the data privacy problem in Germany or?
Yes. I mean, as far as I understood, it is now over, but I remember that I was even... before I went into data, I was already part of the tender for smart meters in Germany. And that was at the same time with UK, so 10 years ago. We tried to buy them. We actually bought some and we never used them because of the fact that they said from a data protection perspective, it is not okay to measure it so continuously. And now it's the same thing and just the opinion changed, right? And that made us delay innovation for 10 years. And this is incredible that something like this can even happen. Yeah. So,
I mean, I guess on one hand, it's good to discuss, right? Like you shouldn't just blindly accept what the massive corporate is pushing onto the consumer. Like in the end, you also kind of want to be sure that, like, because obviously corporate interest doesn't necessarily align with consumer interest.
That's right. Yeah.
So from that perspective, sure, right? You want to have some neutral instance at least, be wary of what a corporate is pushing. But I do have the feeling that sometimes people get lost in more in the argument than the actual, let's say, consequence of the argument itself. And I mean, from my perspective, I mean, obviously I see a large difference between, I've been living in Germany for 12 years now. Yeah, there is a massive difference, even though the cultural difference between the Netherlands and Germany is practically zero, I would say. There's a massive difference in terms of rollout of certain innovation or let's say technology, and it sometimes really feels like you're coming, like, I don't know how the 70s were, but sometimes after, if I've been in Holland for like 1 or 2 weeks, it really feels like I'm coming back to like the 70s in Germany. It's incredible. like small things that really don't make any sense not to implement them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in Frankfurt quite often for work. And it's just a tiny example. There's a parking garage in at Europaplatz,
Mhm.
and not only does it not recognize your Kennzeichen,
Mhm.
yeah, it doesn't recognize your plates. So there's no automation at all. You still have to pay with coins.
I love this.
Coins.
This is
Like you literally, this is one of the main squares of the main financial, let's say, city on continental Europe outside of Paris, maybe.
so you know what you have to do,
And
Kari? You
you
know.
have to pay with you have to pay with coins. And it's
Incredible.
and then I had for family I had to be in the hospital quite a bit over the last 2 months, and if you see how the difference between the hospital there and then a hospital in Germany, just with the patient data, like how smooth everything goes with the handover, the communication, like you'll have a portal where you can log in, you will see which people are working on it, like which shift, which people are working on it. You can call these people, like they're direct. It's and then you're here and you're just like, okay,
That's
we're still debating whether or not this is a good thing,
yeah.
or my tax my taxes, right? My personal income taxes. I filed them in Hessen. Then, because I had an assignment for a long time in Nordrhein-Westfalen, they said, no, you cannot file them here in Hessen. You need to file them in Nordrhein-Westfalen. So I said, yeah, just can you please, Finanzamt, can you please send them to the Finanzamt in Mönchengladbach at the time? And they were like, no, we're not allowed to do that. I'm
Love
like,
this.
are you kidding me? And they're like, yeah, you'll have to print them. You'll have to print them and come by and hand them in. And that's the point where I decided, like, okay, it's like that was my previous company. I said, I will never, ever find, I'm never going to find a company in Germany. Like, that's it. That was it. Done. I'm not, I'm not driving around with papers, right?
Yeah.
That's just no. And I love following the debates as well, like on LinkedIn, but also in the parliament, in the newspapers, like in let's say news outlets. And there's so many people that are saying like, oh yeah, like we need like a German alternative, and like, guys, you need to work on your fundamental data, like like what you're doing at E.ON, like
Yeah.
you need to you need somebody with an iron stick to just go like whack the weeds out. It's like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say at this point anymore. It's just it's hilarious to see, but it's also kind of sad because it's the country I chose to live.
Yeah.
And I love living here. It's like
Yeah.
it's not the point.
That's exactly the interesting conflict I also feel regularly, because it's as I am quite long in this area, and I'm of course having a background in data science, but I also worked in supply chain controlling. I'm a general manager rather, right? So I love to transform things, and whenever I see there's the greatest potential, which is in data, and I love to run the marathon to make that work. And then still sometimes, as you just said, it feels like you don't belong here anymore if you think about something like this. So it feels like, if I really want to see the difference of my work, I won't see this here happening. And this is what makes it a bit sad, because I think there are people who are really willing to fundamentally do this change, and who would be willing to drive it, who would be willing to take the years of people rejecting them to get them after 7 years to the point that they say yes. And it's okay for them to wait, and it's okay for them to do it. But sometimes, as you just said, it starts to feel a bit like hopeless, that we are going to be capable to do this fundamental transformation that this country needs. And this is not just data, it's also so many things in politics, if it comes along our whole educational system and so on. I don't want to go into politics. No, I love politics, but it's in the end of the
You
day,
don't want to get into a political debate.
exactly, because it's
It's a bottomless pit.
exactly. And my husband and I are discussing this every weekend, also for our daughter, for thinking about, is this the mindset and the future that we see for her? Really? Is this that? Do I want her to grow up in such a narrow mindset, or do I want to bring her somewhere where the world is bigger and has more facets and the horizon is broader, right? So it's unfortunately,
I do not
yeah,
want my child to go to school here.
yeah.
I'm going to be very honest about that. That's I'm not railing against the people, standing there
No,
on a day-by-day basis, like working like with the best interest of kids in mind.
yeah,
But it's about the enablement in the end, and it's about structural change. And I do think that let's say, policymakers, they generally tend to live in areas where the schools are well funded.
yeah,
So their kids go to schools where you see like, yeah, okay. And we could choose to move to an area like that. So like people could say, yeah, but you can move there. It's a free country, right? Like you can put your kid in a school like that. But so the policymakers also don't see the necessity necessary to change, right? Like I knew a teacher very well in Frankfurt, and the let's say crazy contrast between the areas where like our policy makers, our political leaders tend to live versus where she was teaching. She was teaching in a school, and she as a teacher had to pay for print outs herself from her salary. And at some point they received a digital whiteboard, but they didn't even have Wi-Fi yet in the school. And like the school needed repainting. And this type of thing where you really say like, okay, yeah, do you want your kid to grow up in a system where obviously the mindset is more like this than it's like than the other way around?
yeah.
And I mean, it's a good question, and I guess there's still a couple of years left.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's clear, but I mean,
To homeschool.
yeah, no. I prefer to work, but I think we also have international schools and so on, which could be possible. But we are still, and my husband and I are still always considering to just work away from Germany for a while. Also, because I mean, especially when you think about data and AI, there's a really broad horizon, and there's a lot to learn. And I always feel like now, if you're always just in the same environment and I always say at one point you have talked to all the people, you have had all the conversations, and where is then your space to learn and grow and to get inspired? I mean, what I do a lot is I actually read a lot, and I do a lot of conversations with people outside of my organization to stay inspired and to get always these impulses that help me to challenge our status quo, and to come up with new ideas and to come up with new inspirational thoughts and so on. But you need to actively search for it, right? So
It's always the case, though.
yeah. But I think just if it comes to
Pull principle.
yeah, exactly, absolutely. But I just think, as with everything in life, but especially on data and AI and how fast things are moving, we need to have a broad horizon. We should not, and we should be willing to fundamentally challenge the way we do things. In Germany, in our company, in our startup, it doesn't matter. And you as a startup, I mean, you fundamentally changed, and not you changed as well, but you also challenged how things are done, right? And this was your purpose. It was your reason to exist, was that you knew it can be done better.
Took 5 years for people to catch up.
Yeah, but this is the change that I'm talking about, right? This is, for you, it took only 5 years. In my case, it was possibly 7 years. But in the end of the day, and this was a really cool statement that I heard in one of my one of the various events that I'm going to, but I think it was like Sheely's TMT from Deloitte, was you are changing at the speed of organization, not at the speed of technology.
No.
And this is what it
That's
shows.
never the case, right?
Yeah.
Like always looking backwards, you think like, change actually went relatively fast, but looking forward, you think like, oh my God, like it's moving at snail pace.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially an organization of 70,000 people. People have opinions. They have not just an opinion, they have a political path. They have own interest. So there's so many forces at work. that you also have to respect those forces, of course. But on a country level, and now, like, if you take it one level higher, right? Um, on an EU level, there's literally no reason. There's zero reason for the entire EU, like all of our enterprise, like our entire enterprise, like ecosystem, to be dependent on Microsoft, on like Dell, or like server architecture, on there's no reason. If the political will is there, there are plenty of smart people and there's plenty of companies that can actually provide the infrastructure. We
That's
do
right.
not need, you do not need a Zoom or or Microsoft Teams, or you don't need a Microsoft Office suite. 20, 30 years ago, you would say like, yeah, okay, that's, it's not so easy to get to that point. You have the integration, then the whole infrastructure behind it. But nowadays, there's literally no reason. And I hate bringing this up, but, like China made a very clear statement. They said, look, like we're going to go for our own operating systems. We're going to go for our own chipsets, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. 8 to 15 years, it's going to hurt. We're going to lag behind, like the absolute, like state of technology, like the actual like, like benchmark. But after that, you're going to catch up.
Yeah.
It's like you're going to slowly catch up. But if you just keep shoveling your money somewhere else, then you're just going to increase that gap. And I said it a couple of years ago when Sam Altman was still pushing the message. I think there's a very famous or infamous like interview now where he says like, oh yeah, I encourage other companies to try to do what we're doing, but like you're never gonna catch up. And obviously he's saying that because he wants to defend a position where, in my opinion, AI models are not a business model. They're just not. The technology is not rocket science.
No.
It's like if E.ON decides today they want to build a transformer model, in 2 years they will have one that is, obviously, maybe they should forget about their corporate structures, their political stuff, like buy maybe a small company that, and leave them. Don't try to integrate them, but, like make sure that you steer them and that you quality check them. But, like don't try to do the corporate thing and don't try to make, like political heads the head, because then you get political interest and you're not going to succeed. But large language models are not a business model. And the fact that the entire discourse in European countries was like, oh my God, they have such a massive, like head start. We're never going to catch up. Guys, really? Like, why would you think that? Like, it's not number one, from a technological perspective, it's not very difficult.
No.
Number two, from a structural and, let's say, philosophical perspective, it's not that difficult. And no, you don't need billions, because that was the thing, right? Like they were throwing billions and they were saying like, oh, we're going to need at least 100 trillion or something to develop, like the next thing. But this is bluff. This is poker. They're doing this to poker you out of the game, to make you believe that you cannot catch up anymore if you do not have the GDP of a small European country. And it's nonsense. And it's been proven now multiple times that it is nonsense. I mean, luckily Mistral never gave up.
Yeah, that's right.
And now you see certain initiatives, but it's what annoys me is that governments buy into the rhetoric. Governments buy into this rhetoric, like into this, okay, let's just give that company, like our money now. Let's just, whatever, it's just 10 euros a month, whatever, they raise the prices 100%. It's now 20 euros a month. That's the whole point. Like it's predatory pricing. It will get you into the service. But 10 years down the line, yes, at that point it's impossible to get, or not impossible. It's very
Well,
prohibitive to
yeah.
catch up. 10 years down the line, you're going to have a massive technological gap. And it's not like Europe, 20, 30 years ago couldn't have done it. We had Philips, we had Siemens, we had, we had Nokia, Ericsson. There were plenty of companies building incredible software, and that were, maybe 1-2 years behind. But if the will would have been there, you would have had a completely different enterprises, like our landscape. And that's what I wouldn't say pisses me off, because almost nothing pisses me off, but I don't get angry very fast. But it irks me,
Yeah.
right? Like it's that, like,
I'm-
why are we such lemmings?
But I think this is for me again this unfortunate characteristic that we kind of discussed indirectly also with not having fundamental changes in Germany as just one example for the EU is, if you would want to do it yourself, it's simply more difficult. It is easier to give someone 10 euros than to take this 10 euros and make, I don't know, 100,000 euros out of it. So I think sometimes it was just, we always said, oh, there's globalization and we should have our focus areas and others have their focus areas, and we don't
That's fair.
automotive. And
That's
exactly, and that's fair, to the point that you need to understand you need to be future ready. So investing always just in steel and automotive or chemicals, which was in Germany, now all of them are fucked up. And we do not really have other bets that we have put on the table to say, okay, theoretically, if something happens here, what else can we invest into? What else can we do? Right? I sometimes feel like we are not ready for this.
It's not even it's not even either or.
Mm.
There's plenty of and, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, go down the chemical path. Super important. That's, like being future ready. Like, if you think about most of the major innovations over the last 150, 200 years that have a chemical background, right? Like the background in physics. Super important. But just don't forget the rest.
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
just say like, yeah, this is what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you can't. And okay, maybe let the French do software then. I don't know, but
It doesn't matter. But I think it is about just ensuring that you have not forgotten that the world is changing infinitely. So you will never be sure that the world in 3 years is going to be the same than it is now. So you need to always have on the radar that you need to be ready for fundamental changes. And then they shouldn't hit you like, shit, what do we do now? Right? How
so
do
now,
I
we've
do
been,
this?
we've been banking on political stability.
Exactly.
And the crazy thing is, maybe even 4 years ago, we just had a discussion with my CTO, and we said, as soon as the money is there, as soon as the, let's say, financial means are there, we will set up our own data center, right? And 20, 30 years ago, like running a data center, super difficult.
Yeah.
Amazon came by, they radically changed it. They made it possible for the donor shop of the corner, the baker, to actually host a website, like for a couple of €1,000 with some small agency from the corner, right? Like 2 people in a corner office hosting and running 500 websites. They made this possible with commercial software. Then commercial software became open source.
Mm.
And now I actually had a small discussion with some of your colleagues in Berlin about this. They asked me, because they asked me, and I said, like, where do you see cloud going? And I said, well, for a company like E.ON, honestly, they should have their own. And I'm not saying do everything yourself. That's never a good advice. Yeah, if somebody else has done it really well, sure, purchase that. But not for something so fundamental as your infrastructure. Sure, you can have a company build your data center. Yeah, don't necessarily in-house the engineers to build the building, to design the thing, but you should be running your own cloud. And now it's easier than ever.
That's right.
There's
And
so
cheaper than
much,
ever.
like and cheaper. Hardware's cheaper, but also you don't need 100 DevOps engineers anymore. You don't need, like you need a few, sure, a few good ones, but a company like E.ON or a company like Deutsche Bahn or the government, they can make it attractive enough. And then you hear like, oh, we're all going to, Azure. And you're like, really?
Yeah, but I think
You're making that decision now? Like last year, the Dutch government, luckily they rolled it back, by the way, because some really critical noise came from like some professors. But all of a sudden, the government just announced like, hey, we're moving everything to Azure. And I was like, whoa, what? Like, well, some very smart Microsoft salespeople were going to be very, very happy.
Yeah. Exactly.
But luckily they rolled it back and honestly, just it's good that Germany waited so long moving to the cloud because, they can actually now just say like, fuck it. I'm sorry. Fuck it. Let's, build our own.
Yeah.
Because it's easy.
That's a completely different market now. But I think, for example, we as E.ON, we need to differentiate between our OT and our IT.
Of course.
Our OT is always on-prem.
Yeah.
So it's our own data centers, but we did have a lot in data centers which was not making sense. So we basically, the last 2-3 years, we have mainly focused on putting our IT applications, which really, I mean, honestly, there was printers.
Yeah.
Printers can be in the cloud, and we had like things always on-prem installed, and this is where it just doesn't make sense. But if it comes along our OT systems, which is the fundamental infrastructure, this is no question. And we are targeting to build a platform now on-prem, on our own kind of environment, which my former boss is now taking over to do, which I think is super exciting. And we still can apply a lot of the new technologies and insights actually to our OT systems as well. And we have been discussing 2 or 3 weeks ago with Amprion 50 Hertz and EMBW Nets, which are also bigger DSOs, or they are also transition system operators. But anyways, they are also, for example, using Confluent in their own on-prem system. So it is all, you can do these things, right? Also
on-prem / cloud, like it's your
exactly, but
hosted cloud.
That's what we.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. So yes, on-prem for me is just that we are owning it. We are responsible. While in the cloud is for us, it's a hyperscale
managed service.
Exactly. So
it's own run versus purchasing it as a managed service.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's a very interesting discussion. I also had that with Elisabeth. She's also from Deloitte, and she was asking me why we are not building more data centers, because we would save a lot of money compared to the hyperscalers. But I also told her the saving is, first of all, OT anyway, no question. IT, I said, this sounds like a saving until you have to build the whole teams who have to manage everything for everyone in a corporate. So it's
it's not always a money question.
Yeah,
it's not about like how many euros am I saving in the end.
That's right. Not any
so
longer.
I think your approach is correct. Like slice. Don't always go black and white.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're gonna move everything to our own cloud, like our own managed cloud, or we're moving everything to managed service. Just make sure that you slice properly, but that you at least understand.
You're aware.
That you are aware that now, like running your own, let's say, cloud services for your own organization is not the effort that it used to be 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can now, especially in a larger organization, when you're talking about utilization of the hardware, if you're talking about the cost, it's not prohibitive anymore. So you can say like, yeah, okay, we might not save cold hard cash on purchasing as managed service or running it in-house, but you might gain on other factors.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
I do think that the current political climate is proving, that this should be a valid discussion. And the discussion why we had it internally is not because of cost. Like my CTO didn't bring it up because he was thinking about the cost of hosting. He was saying we should do so because you don't want to be dependent on a third party making a decision about your service, whether or not they're going to run it or not.
Yeah.
And if they decide today, that tomorrow the thing that you're doing is political and therefore we're going to throw you off. I mean, we're not doing anything political, but let's say hypothetically that we have a customer that all of a sudden the new CEO of our managed cloud, does not agree with. They change their internal policy and they say, look, we don't support certain industries anymore, or companies that, that service certain industries. Then from that moment on, tomorrow we're done. And 10 years ago, people would have said, you're crazy. That's never going to happen.
Exactly.
But I think the last 5 years have proven that people are willing to take business decisions based on feelings, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about, by the way, this is not a woke versus not woke discussion. This is a political discussion, right? A national interest based discussion before people think that I'm talking about feelings from, like that whole discussion. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real national interest. And we've seen it with gas in the EU.
Yeah.
They've never closed, the gas supply. So we shouldn't worry about it now. Yeah. Okay. Well, we learned, I guess, or we saw at least. Right? We haven't learned yet. And now with everything going on in the US, which is heating up the let's say the world political stage in and of itself, it's luckily at least loosening the discussion here as well in the EU about maybe we are very dependent.
Yeah.
And yes, you have your data in a Microsoft data center or with AWS, and they might be physically in Europe. They're still subject to the US Cloud Act. And if you're talking about your biggest ally politically, and they have been historically for the last, we could say almost 100 years, our biggest ally. But just because, historically doesn't mean that it cannot change very fast. And I'm not saying they're our enemy or anything, but there is a very clear push also from across the pond, not in the UK, but like across the bigger pond between us, that, okay, there is absolute animosity. So like animosity is there, which all of a sudden puts this dependence under pressure.
I think what we are seeing there trend-wise is a simple deglobalization. In the end of the day, we are starting more and more to think in our own interest again.
Miniaturization.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it interestingly just needs one big player in the game to decide that everyone else is forced to think the same way, right? I mean, I'm hearing about that very often because I think this is a really, really interesting topic, as I said. And the kind of, yes, we are surprised somehow, but we are also now just reacting, right? I mean, we get the tariffs from the US and now we have to react, right? We have to do something because we need to show that we are not just accepting what they're doing with us and so on. And it starts to get super irrational in a way that, as you just said, economically seen, everything that's happening is plain stupid. But if you just see it from again, this power play topics in the politics, it very often is far away from reality. It's a lot about just proving your power and showing that you can force people to take decisions. I mean, what Trump says is he's a deal maker, right? He can leverage any skill, let's call it skill, he has to get the US the best deals that they need for actually improving themselves. But he just sees his own horizon. He just sees the US and he doesn't see any longer the bigger picture, and he's not interested in the bigger picture, right? Which kind of forces the rest of the world to somewhat kind of take the same direction, right? Or how would you see that?
Which, before I'm going to say what I'm going to say, let me make one thing clear. I think the core of his message is not wrong. The core of his message is not wrong. Just the way that he executes it is, in my opinion, it's an opinion. I'm obviously not. I'm just an idiot. Yeah. In this regard, like so it's an opinion. Please take it as such. But I do have an opinion about this topic. I have, like, about a lot of topics, I have no opinion about this. I do. Um, I think the fundamental message that the US has been played and was acting as the generous person in the group of friends, right? They have been footing the bill. They have been. This is correct. They have also been, for a long time, maybe not the last 10, 15 years, but for a long time, they were then on the receiving end of it. By footing the bill, they actually came out on top. Whether it be, enterprise, whether it be cultural, whether it be political influence across the globe, like maintaining that stability. Their military technology, it's a massive industry. So by footing the bill, they were actually also benefiting themselves. Fine, right? Like, I'm not like good on you, right? Like, if you manage to do that, respect. So I'm not riffing on that at all. I think, if you riff on that, the only message should be like, yeah, okay, if you don't agree with it, do better yourself, right? Like, if the EU wants to be that guy at, like in the friend group, then, well, step up, like, do better. Like, don't point fingers. Like, don't hate the player, hate the game, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to be that person, then be that person. Don't, don't rip on their characteristics or, try to pull them down behind their back. So the core of the message, sure, there's the last 15 years, there's been massive inequality then on the stage because they've been footing the bill and they've been exploited. And on one end, China has been, exploiting it hardcore, right? And they're very open about it. Like, there's nothing like, like they take technology, the Chinese state is sponsoring energy. Companies can have energy practically for free. So the products that they produce are always anti-competitive. Transport is practically for free. So, like, try to transport like a real industrial piece across Europe, that's expensive.
Yeah.
And that has to go in the cost price, right?
Yeah.
So the companies,
Theoretically, yes.
is it? Yeah. So naturally, like, if these things are cheaper or for free, then that's state sponsorship, right? And then if you want to start a company there, like a national has to have at least 50% ownership, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's all of these measures that we've just been accepting because big market, because money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we can sell there, but it's short-sighted, right? Yeah. Maybe medium-sighted at best. So the core of the message, like, hey, we need to make sure that manufacturing jobs come back, that we become competitive again in certain fields. That core of the message, he's absolutely correct. And we should look at that and think, oh my God, like, he's leading the way. We should think about that for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the world stage and say, like, okay, maybe we have been giving away everything too cheaply.
Exactly.
Okay, that's
like
the fine
to save money ourselves
message.
and earn more money. I mean, at the end of
whose
the day,
fault was it? Our own?
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Reflect on that and then say it was our own fault, but we are now a better, not human being, but economy. We're now going to make a change for the future generation, so that they can actually enjoy certain standards of living. But then you have the execution part.
Yeah, and that's where
and the execution
kind of
part
feels
is
like
yeah. We say in Dutch, the knuppel in het hoenderhok. It's, he just comes out with like a stretched leg, and I'm just thinking, man, you have so many well-educated, smart people willing to follow you into this fight, right? Like, into the fight of, like, actually bringing back those jobs, but that's a 10, 15-year policy. That's not something you do overnight with tariffs. Like, slapping tariffs on a country is not going to make entire production lines immediately pack their stuff into moving boxes. It's not going to make your educational system you need a generation to be educated to pick up those jobs. And so you need a long-term policy. And that's the last part. If you want investor confidence, I mean, you like capital markets, you say, like, if you want investor confidence, this does not exude confidence.
No, it absolutely doesn't. If you see how the whole not only Wall Street but the whole capital markets are reacting, you see that there is no confidence, and they are just basically, if they are not already in, they will be in a bear market most likely because of his reactions.
You're just kind of looking.
Yeah.
I would love to be in a beer market.
I know that you can buy.
No. I meant like an actual.
You mean beer? Sorry, I was just like that. Like, not drinking so much alcohol at the moment. And I'm a wine drinker. That's also not reason why.
Let's rename it.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same. That would make it so much more appealing.
Yeah, but anyway, enough about that. I think actually before.
But still, I think
do you want to grab like a coffee and then come back?
Of course, we can. Yeah.
Shall we do a short break and then come back?
Yeah, we can. Okay, very good.
With fresh coffee.
Yes.
Yeah, you're just making a point about trying to rush things.
When you were just explaining the way you perceive the way that Trump is coping with the situation, I was thinking back on what I've just said about if you try to do a transition that takes 7 years and 2, and you think you're smarter and better and everyone else just didn't get the point and you are the only one who gets it. This is a bit how it feels when you watch him right now. I think he's just trying to rush a change, because I feel like in his first 4 years, he tried to play the game by the rules, and he wasn't satisfied with the outcome because he maybe didn't see the long-term perspective. While now he's just like, I had 4 years to think what I all have to do in the first kind of couple of months to have to,
what he promised, what was going to change in like the first 100 days, we're going to do, X.
And it feels like really he just took the 4 years of saying, okay, what will I all decide in the first couple of weeks, months of when I'm back in power, to now really make the difference. And what is so crazy about it is that he really still thinks that these fundamental changes are going to come now just because he has put the tariffs in, and now this is going to fix all the problems.
Well, there are going to be fundamental changes, that's for sure.
That's right. That's already happening. That's right. That's happening. And I also don't know if it's all just negative, everything that's happening, because what I see was Europe now stepping up more, taking more responsibility, changing the mindset. It sometimes needs this trigger and force to do this fundamental change that I said before, I'm not sure if we are capable of doing. Now we don't have the option, right? And I think sometimes this kind of environment, which might be a bit negative, can lead into a positive development if you are just coping with it in a way that you see an option of improvement and doing things better than you did in the past, right? So if we tackle it, if we really take it serious, and if we make fundamental changes, then this might have been the trigger we needed to get more confident and more relevant again, right? So,
yeah, and I think we should also not, like, as a block of nations, let's call it that, as the EU, you should not forget, obviously, also who your friends are, who your allies are. I mean, he might be acting irrationally in
the execution.
In the execution, you should watch out not to respond in kind, right? Don't mimic necessarily what somebody is doing. So I really hope that people don't resort in the, now we all have to buy toilet paper type of panic, And I'm not just talking about, I'm talking about, our politicians. Unfortunately, good politicians are very, well, it's a long time ago, and any European nation truly had a good one. But I really do hope that, like, some of our politicians, especially of the bigger nations, will step up to the mark and take that respect, like fill that void, and now say, like, okay, let's not respond in kind, but also let's not forget, let's not start hating, because that's also, it's always easy, right? It's always easy to hate on the successful person. It's easy to hate on the successful company. It's easy to hate on, people love hating. Like, so it's like drama somehow is in our DNA, and that's why, you know, TV shows are popular that are popular, like that's why newspapers, like I think Dan Carlin said it, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, exactly.
So like people are infatuated with drama, and that's, like, and a lot of Europeans are very good at, like, like, oh, let's hate on the Americans, right? It's a favorite pastime, and if you can't, you hate on your neighbor because they have a bigger car than you,
Exactly.
right? Like,
But
it's like,
see, this is exactly what I meant with, I hope they are not going into this power play kind of mode where you're just trying to outplay each other. Because in the end of the day, this is not a game. It's not a finite game for someone is going to win, right? No one is going to win. There is no way you can win because it's an infinite game. There is no end to it. There's no clear rules or anything to it. You need to navigate through this with the mindset that it's about playing the game. It's not about winning it or being better or worse. There's always going to be moments where others are better, and there are going to be moments where maybe you are better. But it's about, how do I really play in an environment where there is no ending, but I just have to continue,
it's
right?
co-op. It's also co-op, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's where, and if you already want to point out in, these differences, then also understand who you're playing the game with. Like, who is your cooperative partner at
Yeah.
that table, and they might have better cards than you. Maybe they already have better cards than you for, 80 years. And that might irritate you, but just because they're acting irrationally, don't follow suit.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, yeah, let's circle back a bit to the corporate world. I'm also very curious to, because data in and of itself, very big topic. I'm super happy to hear that now slowly, and I'm really happy to see that slowly companies and governments are taking it more seriously. We see it also, by the way, in the customers that we talk to. Like I said, otherwise we would have never, like 2 years ago, it would have been almost impossible to do at a government what we are doing now. E.ON, being as big as it is, being as diverse as it is, in the sense of product, in the sense of also responsibilities, is there something that you're currently, like, your vision outside of let's say market capitalization, growth, acquisition? Is there a specific vision that you share, or that the board has, where they want this to go?
I mean, we basically have 3 major pillars that are driving us and that we are investing into, if you want to say. And investing is not just money, it is about resources, mindsets, and all this kind of stuff. The first one is simple growth, and this is growth in investing into our grid, because, with a decentralized way of producing energy, we are not made for this grid-wise, so we have to invest into being able to cope with this energy transition. On the other hand, we have growth in our infrastructure solutions business, so basically helping companies, for example, to get independent from the market by producing energy by themselves, or by managing the energy that they have better, by managing their buildings better, all that. We have also growth, of course, in e-mobility and future energy homes. So this is all areas where we know that if we are growing here, we are not just growing as a company, but we are actually really driving the energy transition. Because every time that one of our customers, being a B2C, B2B, whatever, is investing into this, they are automatically investing into the energy transition, and they are really helping to drive that across the 17 countries that we are operating in. So we are a real playmaker and a game changer when it comes along this energy transition across Europe. And this is a huge thing. And this part with the growth is basically how we are helping the whole societies, because it's in different countries, to be able to reach this and to transition it. And this is one part of it. And I think the second one is coming directly, very natural with it, is sustainability, of course, because for us, sustainability is absolutely essential. And this planet is just here once, right? And we already know that if we are not working on being more sustainable, and sustainability is, of course, very much into energy, but for example, also sustainability is financially, right? Ensuring that we can finance this society long term. And for example, on the 5th of March, we have published a playbook in which we have shown how you can, at 30 to 40% lower cost, still do the energy transition. So we are thinking it from kind of different perspectives. So one is the enabling people to really do the energy transition, and then also thinking it from a pure financial and cost perspective. How do we make this affordable for everyone to actually succeed, right? So I've seen that you wanted to say something about it. That's why I'm pausing.
No, I love the 30 to 40%. There's always, when there's management consultants involved, and there's the 30%.
You're right.
There's 30 to 40%. But do I smell
paper?
do I smell McKinsey?
No, I think actually it's a quite it's.
But what I wanted
Yeah.
to say as a joke is like, look, I actually am of the staunch belief that I or anybody can walk into any company larger, like 3,000 employees or bigger, and you can cut 30% without any problem. You can save, like, I'm 100% convinced that you can cut 30% out of E.ON in terms of people cost without it affecting anything.
I mean, this is always I mean, first of all, funny effect is X did 80% cut down, and they are still running, and they're still too expensive, and they're still not earning money. I mean, manage that. So it didn't even help. But the challenge is, if you think about that direction, I would absolutely agree with you that this is true. If there wouldn't be the law that doesn't allow you to take out the 30% that should be out, to actually
You talk
achieve
about
the
actual
50%.
national laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You know what
I'm just
so
saying, like,
theoretically,
theoretically, it's super easy.
yeah.
Like, of course, practically, you're going to run into, oh, this person has already been with the company for 30 years. They have 6 kids.
Exactly,
Of
which is
course,
also fine.
practically.
It's very
Yeah.
important, but I always say this to my team. When you're thinking about it, it's easy. When you have to do it, this is when you make the difference. And I said, whenever you think
Ideas
that
are cheap.
that it sounds easy and too easy, you most likely have a hell of a problem in front of you, because you never have easy solutions to complex problems. And I would still agree that this is the case.
But
but
the solution can be easy. The implementation can still be hard as hell.
Yeah. Because of the cost.
Building products, like implementing, is eating glass.
Yeah, I know. I've done it the last 3 years with our platform.
Yeah,
this like that.
It's eating glass, but that's fine, right? I just had to laugh about the 30 to 40%.
Yeah,
it's always the 30 to 40%.
I know, and still, it's always theoretically true.
Yeah, it is.
What I mean, and that's where I'm fully with you. Yeah. Yeah.
McKinsey, ECG, who earned money on this?
They always earn, and that's their business model.
Yeah, sure.
On the other hand, if you want to learn a lot, going there and be part of, I think that organization is enough cool, because you learn a lot in a lot of different projects.
So 30%.
Yeah, you see. So and then that's where you earn your money from. Yeah. But maybe to finalize it off, our third pillar in our strategy is digitization. And this is a really, really, really big and important topic for E.ON, because the first two, we cannot achieve them without getting more efficient, more digital, because of the fact that we do have this lack of skilled people going with the generation of the boomers going in retirement. We are not going to have the people running the business as we do it today. No. So digitization for us is, if we don't manage to do this, we won't manage to do the other two the way we were planning to do that.
What does E.ON understand under digitization?
It's various things. So we do have, starting with the easiest one, employee satisfaction and productivity. So we want our employees to be, as I said, happy in the way they can work, and that they get easy access to data, for example, that they can, if they want to use GenAI for random stuff, let them do it. Let them enjoy the moment and just, like do job postings, as I do it all the time with GenAI. And this is a part of it. Then we do have general operational excellence. So, for example, I've built a data platform the last 3 years. And we had a case where it took 3 years to get access to data for a use case. In production, of course. Of course, you can always get an Excel sheet, yeah? But in production, full access to the system, and you get this data recurrently without a big deal, 3 years. We had the first big systems connected then as part of our data platform, which took 262 days.
That's something.
To get access to it. And through the platform, we have reduced this now to, I think, 14 days or something if you want to get access to data, because we have to do still some, because of the unbundling law and some other laws we have to comply to, we have to do some changes in the pipelines. And we are going to bring it down further. But in fact, that means from operational excellence perspective, we have wasted so much time and energy in trying to get our data. And with this new platform that we have established now over the last 3 years, we are simply way faster, and it's governed, it's running, it's in production, it's reliable. We have an operations team behind it. I'm still operating this platform. That's the one I talked about in the beginning. So it had a huge impact on the possibilities for the units to work. And that's what we call operational excellence there. Of course, then we do also have the possibility of simply developing our own software or new ideas, new insights, right? We do have easy stuff, like now we can get transparency about our grid connection process. It's maybe not something for everyone to know, but if you want to have electricity in your new built home, you are asking for the connection to the grid so that you can actually get the electricity in your home. This process is consuming 3 to 5 data sources, depending on what DSO you're in. And we are now having the possibility, we have the data from all those systems into our platform, and they can now really manage this process in the way they couldn't before, and it makes it more efficient, and we get new insights. We can see how long does it take, where do we have problems in the steps, all this kind of stuff is process mining and so on. So this is the easy part. And then we also have E.ON One, which is our software company, if you want to say, from E.ON, where we are investing into startup scale-ups, like, for example, Envelio, as the digital twin of the grid. And we are, first of all, applying the software as a standard inside of E.ON, but we are also helping them to sell outside of E.ON. And we have this with them. We have Palua, we have, I think, Brightside or Brightlight, one of the names. Or we have One Voice now from E.ON One, which is what we are offering based on Palua. So we do have software companies which is not only helping inside of E.ON, but is helping like rather mid-sized or smaller companies in the energy industry to kind of...
So it's providing services.
Exactly. And having the advantage of what a big company is that we can invest more in topics like this, like smaller companies, so we can help them to leverage what we know already from our big corporate, and they can just use it, right? And we are offering it to them. So we have various ways of applying then the digitization there. And then, of course, we're also just digitizing our internal processes again. So I think this is where we are mainly focusing on. As I also said, the EIoT, so the management of the grid, to have more transparency there. So these are the major areas that we are basically digitizing, and that they're are driving various perspectives of us, right? Various impacts on our business model itself. So new business models, improve business models, and then improve also the way our employees can work.
Do you notice, or do you know whether or not E.ON sees a potential threat in people and or companies becoming their own energy provider? So like with miniaturization, let's say the cost going down of becoming energy independent. I mean, that might not be the case yet fully, but it's becoming more feasible, at least. In 10 years, we'll probably have a completely different situation where for a company, even an energy intensive company, and especially for a home or maybe multi-family homes, it becomes very feasible, also economically feasible, to become their own energy provider.
Yeah.
How does E.ON see a threat from this, or?
No, we see it as an opportunity. Yeah. This is clearly for us opportunity. We, with flexibility, which is our core priority and our strategy, we are targeting to exactly enable those people who have then installed PV, whatever, to trade their energy so that they can actually earn money. So I think for us, it's not a threat, because naturally decentralized energy production is this. So we are supporting this to be set up. We are supporting people to develop into that direction. And of course, that means we are not seeing it as a threat, but we see it as an opportunity that we can help them to be successful in doing so. Because as we said, our purpose is the energy transition. And this is a part of it. This is the core of it, right? So in the end of the day, we are driving this, that people get independent, and we are helping them then with flexibility to be able, as I said, to earn money with the electricity they bring into the market, and that we are still able to manage our grid, because again, there's loads that we can put into the grid and there's limits to it. So we cannot just infinitely put energy into our grid. So actually, we are just getting prepared to make that
studies
work.
Running into like how E.ON sees this develop, because it will have lasting impact on the grid as well. Like, how are you going to build out your infrastructure, or maybe even build back infrastructure? Because if some very energy heavy industries all of the sudden, let's say, localize energy production, you might not have the same utilization of the grid anymore. Are there any is E.ON modeling these type of changes, or are they looking into it?
We are definitely, and we are already acting on it. So that's why I said we are investing 7.4 billion into our grid. And this is to be able to cope with these changes. Because as we all know, in the past, power plants, all the grid was centered around that. And we just had to transport the power out, right? But there were just a few power plants across the country. With the investments we are taking, and not only now, but already since we started the strategy, which was, I think, already 3 or 4 years ago, we have to shift and change the way we are building our grid. If we are going to build it back, I don't know if we really prioritize that, but what we are definitely prioritizing is to put the infrastructure in place to be able to have a fully decentralized energy production and distribution. And this is what we're investing into since years. And now with the war in the Ukraine, we had to double our investments, and we had to kind of speed up tremendously, which makes us, I mean, it's huge, it's cool, but we sometimes have to do things now in 5 years that we used to do in 20, with knowing that you're losing a lot of people in the future just because of the boomer generation going in retirement. We are under a huge pressure to make this work, but if there's one thing that I still love to be here, and why I'm since 15 years with E.ON, is that we are reinventing ourselves. And we know how to see the future, and we are not threatened. We just really try to, let's say, path the way for the people, for this to work, right? We are investing into our grid. We are investing into flexibility platforms. We are investing into also,
do you see interest from within E.ON in let's say these miniaturized nuclear reactors that are coming up?
Didn't hear about
new
it yet.
technology, but it's like the last 10 years. There's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like 1 or 2 are being deployed in Romania already. Like, I think it's an American company that is deploying. I mean, of course, relatively small.
Compared to what we had in Fresno Electra. I mean, I think I have not concretely heard about that. And usually I hear about stuff, but I didn't hear it also from our corporate strategy. But generally speaking, Fresno Electra is still a nuclear company, mainly building back our power plants. So we don't have new ones, but we have a company that is still working nuclear, right? And we see that these are investments that are taken in the US by the big tech companies to finance the development of their own models, or not finance, but to provide the energy by themselves. I wouldn't say that I've seen that this is a priority. And I'm super curious on the discussions which are going right now. I'm aware of the discussions between CDU and SPD about the nuclear energy and if they are going to reverse the decision, which, by the way, economically doesn't make any sense anymore. But instead of maybe
reverse the decision doesn't make sense, to rely on nuclear energy.
Exactly. No, and I have to rephrase it. Reverse the decision, absolutely. Using our nuclear power plants that are existing right now
doesn't make sense.
That's what I mean.
Economically, invest in new technology then.
It could be, and that's where I'm coming to this point. It could be interesting to say, we know we cannot use the nuclear power plants we used to have because they are rebuilt. They are simply not there. You cannot just go and say, now we use them again. But exactly like this, So, and the discussion was again last year, and they already said it's no business case. But to invest maybe into new technologies now, which are providing this kind of energy, and it's not the power plants that we used to know, obviously. But I think this highly depends again on the political decisions, because we all know these are still investments and we need to have some kind of planning horizon. And as you said, capital markets don't like it if things are changing too fast and all the time. So if they would decide that nuclear is again an option, possibly this would be a moment in time when we also start thinking about that. But right now, I'm not aware.
Looking maybe for to insource the technology, possibly.
Yeah, because in the end of the day, still a challenge is we always call it Dunkelflaute. I don't know the exact name in English, but it means...
Is it in German? Dunkelflaute?
Dunkelflaute. It's like when there's no solar energy provided and during the winter months, right?
Okay,
and you simply don't get that. And then you have the peaks and you need to balance the grid, period. That's physically simply necessary, right? And potentially, and this is just me thinking, this is not E.ON thinking, this could be a possibility to somehow cope with that, right? And you would still have a decentralized setup because you would have them in different areas. And even it could be something that we are not financing, but companies are financing. But again, through the flexibility, we are able to use these assets and to, let's say, have this platform in place where we are allowing that we have this balance in the grid and that we can use them as an additional component between PV, between battery. Then this is another one that we are actually tackling, right? So I would say it's something, in any case, if it's coming, we can cope with it and we can integrate it into our thinking. If we are going to be offering it ourselves or invest into it ourselves, I wouldn't be aware of that we are discussing that. But, I'm also not in the boardroom all the time. So,
obviously.
But it's a super interesting thought, though. Yeah.
Do you have the feeling that E.ON is more reactive to policy, or do you also see it shaping policy very strongly?
I mean, I would rather say we are shaping. I wouldn't say we are everywhere because you have to choose your battles. Yeah, also in policy making, there are so many things always going on that you can't always react to everything. But we have a dedicated team which is basically focusing on feedback for any kind of regulations or policies. And as said, you see Leo quite strongly cooperating with the politics as well and being very present there as well. And that's why we presented this paper. It was a 50 pages paper, so really about a concrete description what we can do in Brussels. So we are definitely there, and we are also, for example, part of, let's say, the policy defining bodies for AI. And also to create the awareness there as well. And I even myself remember when GDPR was not yet in place, but it was still discussed that we contributed to also giving the industry perspective on what they have planned and provided feedback and what we see as being critical in the regulation, all this kind of stuff.
Worked out well in Germany.
Yeah, very well. That's why I think it's, it's always, we are there. We are definitely contributing. Questions, do they listen? And this is something that we cannot always influence. And if you see the AI-EU Act, for example, there are so many discussions right now if they went over the top.
Of course they did.
Yeah. And this is now, I have not talked to them myself, that they also realize, shit, now seeing it practically applied maybe was a little bit over the top. What shall I say? I mean, we are definitely aware, we are shaping. I'm having regulation management in my team for data and AI regulations. So we are actually translating what data protection and the legal guys are defining into technical appliance and how you really actively make that work and be compliant to the regulations in the way you're setting up your platforms, products, and all this kind of stuff. So this is why I'm quite aware of the topic and quite close to it. Yeah, I would say we are not just reacting. We take that quite serious because it has a quite dramatic impact.
Yeah, of course. Especially in a company this size.
Yeah.
For sure. No, I was wondering because of the whole nuclear discussion, nuclear energy discussion, and because of the whole modeling, because I think E.ON has the power, especially to work together with universities to also say hey, how do we model certain trends? How do we model energy demand? How do we model in these type of things? And they are fundamental for an economy.
Yeah.
You can take a lot of things away, and a country would continue to operate. But you take energy away for an hour, it means absolute chaos.
Yeah, yeah, and
Like the hilarious type of chaos, right? Like
exactly.
where people start
I mean,
rioting and
yeah, and also, I mean, in the end of the day, what we are now used to, internet and all of this, everything doesn't work anymore, right? So it's very fundamental. But what we're actually doing with the Technical University of Aachen, I have been there 2 years ago. They have a whole simulation of the grid.
Okay.
So with them together, we are doing research for a long, long time, and they do have by themselves also directly on their own servers a possibility to basically simulate the whole grid, and also to simulate what would it mean if we do changes to the grid, what technology changes we need in the hardware in our grid to cope with the changes that we have ahead of us. And we had a data event directly in Aachen, and one of the professors presented how we need to change in hardware specifically to be able to cope with the changes in our grid, but also to be able to, for example, work on the IoT and being aware of everything that is happening into our grid, just because of the limitations in Kappa, for example, that simply are limited for the whole world. So you cannot unlimitedly use it and recycle it. So it was super inspiring. And with them specifically, we are cooperating on the topic and we are having a look at it. So that's possible for sure. Yeah.
yeah, because I think like shaping, like you want to be proactive, not necessarily always reactive. Of course, there's going to be events where you are reactive, i.e., the EU AI Act. Of course, then there's a decision in how do you respond. Where I've always made I don't know if it's a joke, but the observation, let's say, when I came to Germany and the Netherlands are not different in terms of law or culture. They're not. But they're different in the way they interpret it and they apply it. In the sense that GDPR, DSGVO, is not more stringent in Germany than it is in the Netherlands.
That's right.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's the Netherlands, the government has the same strict interpretation of the European GDPR law. A regulation, not law. However, the way that people that take compliance roles within companies, and you also have to think of the mindset, who takes this type of role, right? Who goes through university, like what type of character? And I'm not ripping on people that are in compliance, by the way. Like don't misinterpret this, but you have to be of a certain mindset to actually go on this career path, right? Same with being an auditor. You have to go into you have to be a certain mindset. And then you see what is all of a sudden possible. Let's say, again, hypothetically, I was with a relatively large corporate. Not 70,000, but not far away from it. And in the Netherlands, we introduced a way of opening an account digitally 14 years ago. On a Sunday, with your coffee, you could open an account sitting at your own coffee table with your mobile device at the time, right? Be it a laptop, I think it was still the first iPad.
It's like I was just thinking as well when the first iPhone came out, and I think it was
No, that was a bit before that. Actually, that was 2 or 3 years before. No, maybe 4 years before that, but whatever the timelines, right? And so we're the first, let's say, financial institution that allowed people to do that. I was part of the team, and like what we noticed was there was a change in compliance. There was a change in who was responsible for compliance. And the woman that came in at the time who took over responsibility for the entire compliance section of that organization, had a completely different mindset. Her mindset was, you tell us what you want and we will try to see how we can make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's not always going to be exactly the way you want it, but we're going to achieve the goal that you want to achieve. And our goal was to allow people to open an account on the Sunday, like with a coffee, sitting in, well, it's Holland, so there's not much sun, but, sitting in the rain, there's wind everywhere.
A really nice, cozy Sunday.
A cozy Sunday, a proper summer day in the Netherlands. it's 12 degrees, you know. um, and I should move my phone because it's causing interference. Yeah, and she just said, let's make it happen, and it happened, right? Like it worked, like it did. She was not God, like it didn't, you know, like it was not on day one. And then I was brought to the German organization, like they proactively pulled me there, and we said, let's do the same. And the first thing I got from compliance there was like, Siebren, I know in the Netherlands, you know, like, ihr seid so viel lockerer. And I'm like, that's not how it works. And they said, like, yeah, but like, it's not allowed. Like, German law prevents this. And I said, okay, but then show me where it is written. Show me where it is written that you cannot do this. And they were like, oh, of course they got angry. Because of course they couldn't show me a law that said this doesn't work. And their, you know, like their response at the time is, the law says you need to be in the same, like you need to be able to identify the person, right? Like in order to be able to identify the person, you need to be in the room. Like I need to look you in the face. You need to set like a signature. Like I need to see you do all this. That's of course bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like, it's how you interpret it. And the law in Germany was no different than in the Netherlands.
No.
And this is where I love is like, yeah, okay, policy shaping, preferable, because you get a seat at the table, you get a voice. If you don't have it and you have to be reactive, as an organization, you still have a choice in, dear player, which way do you choose, right?
Exactly.
So like, do you choose the way of making sure that, you know, changing your organization is difficult by what mindset are you recruiting, like in those critical roles? And the best thing I heard, and shout out to Timo, I met an ex, let's say, front office guy from UBS, Germany. Amazing guy. And he said, well, he was responsible for a large, let's say, sales area or front office area, like customer facing, let's call it that. And he said, whenever the organization came with something that I did not want to do, I just asked them in the first project meeting, did you guys discuss this with compliance?
I know. I know this game. I have seen it.
And that's it. And he said,
I've seen it so often.
He said it was a surefire way. It was a surefire way of delaying the project at least a year.
Yeah.
He said, for 12 months, I wouldn't be bothered by it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, done. It was out of my hair.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that may work in some organizations, but if these organizations pick the right compliance people, pick the right risk people, like, look, let's not forget compliance. You can still be compliant. You don't need to break the law, but at least be, you know, try to work towards a goal.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that, you remember I talked about having this global data platform that we implemented 3 years ago. We are still doing, but we started 3 years ago. And at that point, when we started this, there were 3 or 4 times where they have tried it already and failed. And why? Compliance. They basically had the platform, people were loading data, and they had no clue what data is in there, who is responsible, how it is used, all of that, right? Typical stuff that, I mean, I don't think it really happens today, but at that time it was some general problem in almost any organization. And I'm data governance since 7 years. So my connection to compliance, data protection, legal is very, very close. Exactly.
Buddy.
Exactly. And before we even designed the platform, we were already discussing with them, what do we need to do to have this platform fully governed that you don't take it off? What is it that we need to comply to? And then they gave us some framings where they said, this is an absolute must. This is where we can discuss about different solutions and so on. And we built a platform that was compliant by design. And it was the first platform being compliant by design. And it is the only platform that survived inside of E.ON because we are compliant, because we talk to them from the beginning and we take it really serious. And of course, if you compare now onboarding to a compliant platform to just build some random stuff on your laptop, guess what is faster? But I always said, and I had these conversations every time almost, I said, I'm not about being the fastest. I'm about being the best. and being a compliant platform. So I don't need to compete with you. That's not my idea. My idea is to build a platform that can last.
Will last.
Exactly. And interestingly, after some struggles in the beginning, the people started to buy into this because they have realized always, they have done it themselves and it failed. And someone said, you are not allowed to do it. You are not using it and so on. And at one point they realized, okay, I cannot avoid it. So I have to stick to it. And then I rather don't go to the pain myself, but I let the guys from the platform team do it. And they have to go through the pain. And then we are just consuming our data, being fully compliant, right? But it was a bit of a ride to bring these two worlds together of the compliance people, which I really I'm very close to them. I like governance, right? I like a very lean governance. I'm not a strict governance person, but I like governance and structures and processes and all this. And then those people who wanted to have the result tomorrow, without all this compliance stuff that no one needs to care about, right?
And you gotta walk in the middle.
Yeah.
You gotta walk in the middle. Like you can't go. You never go to extremes. Like,
yeah.
Never go. I cannot say it actually. I wanted to quote Tropic Thunder, but we'll put it in the subtitles and we'll star out that what I was gonna say. No, it's an interesting thing because we're still a startup. Right? Like, or I still run a startup, let's say like that. We're a small company. And if you compare it to the US, where people are, by the way, the US is Germany with a different mindset, I always say jokingly, because they have just as many rules. Yeah. Like workers' rules. They like the Fed is, famously the entire world looks at the Fed, what type of like regulation they come up with and rule like and directions they come up with. So I mean, they don't come up with the regulation, but yeah, their policy, let's say like this. But the mindset is so different. So if you're a startup in the US, selling your product to a major enterprise is 1,000 times easier because they will just say, okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah.
Let's give it a try. Yeah. And the difference here, by the way, these are not excuses at all because you see a big difference in Europe. Like there is a big range. The Dutch government said, okay, whatever, let's give it a try. So like they were faster to move and more interested in trying than some of the German corporates that we work with, where you have with a certain organization, we've been in talks for 24 months, 2 years. 2 years we were in talks with them. And it went from, we're interested, but, and in the end, what is preventing you from just giving it a super small, lean try, right? And that's also the difference. Like, sure, don't forget compliance, make sure that they're involved, but also let's not make everything like into, don't turn everything into like an elephant.
No.
Don't turn, like every mosquito into an elephant. And that's the big difference, I think, in these conversations you have to go through. And it's like also the fundamental difference in why does a country or a company not innovate that fast is those first crucial small decisions. And to say like, yeah, okay, of course, if you try something, you like it, and you start thinking about implementing it, that would be the time. Those would be the crucial 6 months to 12 months, like the piloting, like all of these type of things where you say like, are we going to go with this product? And if so, how do we roll it out? How do we fit it into our organization? And if you run 30, 40, 50 years of, let's say, unwritten policy that an idea will be shut down at the start, people are not going to pitch ideas anymore because, or like fewer people are going to pitch ideas. I came blauäugig to Germany and we had a couple of locations within a single city and people were taking taxis or were taking taxis. So they were spending a lot of money and sitting a lot of time in traffic. And I said, why don't we just get some company bikes? Because it's close by. And, people would actually like to bike. People actually wanted, they didn't like taking taxis. And immediately it was just, as a stupid idea. Like, maybe it's a stupid idea. Like, it's a small idea. It's not major innovation, right?
Mhm.
But it's a small idea. And the first thing was, no, we cannot do that. Germany is impossible. Why? Because we have to maintain them. If something goes wrong, the company is responsible.
So residual taxis.
Like the whole thing, right? And
I know Germany. I'm living here. I know our downsides. Yeah, absolutely.
I was like, yeah, but in the Netherlands, surely if I take a company bike and I get into an accident, it's still on company time. It's the same insurance. It's the same law. It's not that different. But the fact that the response immediately is no,
Mhm.
not like, oh, it's a cool idea, let's maybe look into it. The answer can still be no at the end, right?
Yeah.
My mom always used to say, nee heb je, ja kun je krijgen. No? So like it can still be no. Like the benchmark can still, like, it can remain the same. Like your environment hasn't changed, but at least you tried. But hear that enough, and at some point you're just like, yeah, you know what? I'm not even gonna. And that's where you start to miss out on actual great ideas. And I'm not saying the bike idea was a great idea. It's just, it was an idea that came up, right? But that's where you start missing out on opportunity. And
Yeah, but I think it also shapes the culture, right? It helps either a culture where everyone can share ideas and we do not have to follow all of them, but we are open for them and we appreciate that.
please don't follow all of.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I was just saying, it's like, of course, you cannot follow any and every idea that comes up.
Sure.
But in the end of the day, you should encourage people to think beyond what they know. And they should challenge the status quo. Because if we don't do this, we cannot, no company can remain the same way it is without dying, honestly. This whole environment is changing. Society is continuously changing. Our economy is continuously changing. So how do you think as a company you can just stay the way you are and you are going to be the only one being the same in a continuously changing environment? So I think you need to be always
so
open.
pushes people to complain at the coffee machine instead of to actually make changes.
Yeah. And I think that's why having the culture of saying, I would go a bit further. If there's someone that says, I would like to do this and I have this idea, then I would say you're accountable for making that work. And because, as we said, ideas are cheap, right?
Yeah.
So you need to want to have people who are not just bringing up the idea, but you say, okay, you want to do this, I'm going to help you. You can do, but you are accountable and you have to do it yourself.
Yeah, pick it up, take responsibility.
Exactly.
Try it out. Try it small, keep it scoped.
Yeah.
Keep it focused.
But give them the opportunity to be like entrepreneurs, where they can invent in their own organization, right? Because what I don't like, and this is something that I see and I really don't like, is people just complaining without being willing to put the effort to make the change.
Yeah.
And this is what I hate. I hate people who are just like, for example, we have too high costs for our taxis. And you're like, thank you for the hint. Really appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. But for someone who says, we have too high costs, I have this idea with the bikes. I have talked to some people. We could make this work at that and that price.
Bikes exist.
Yeah, exactly. But not only that, for this, okay, my expectation of this guy is not just to say, we can do bikes. I would have expected that person to say, okay, if I do this is my total amount I spend on taxis. This is how much I have to spend, first investing into bikes. Exactly. And then have this really thought through in a way that, like, I can make a business out of this inside of our business because I can see you are saving money based on this long term, and I'm ensuring that I contribute to you as a business. And I think this is the mindset we need, is this entrepreneurial mindset where people can just come in and not just have an idea or not just have a complaint, but think like they are part of this business, but they can make their own business inside the business, right?
And don't make it immediately massive.
No.
Give it a small try. Buy
People think it. Yeah, exactly.
Don't.
See if it's accepted, see if the customers like it, see if there's really such a high risk with accidents, if it's so much higher than for taxis. You can use statistics to see if generally taxis have more accidents, bikes have more accidents. If why, then,
Don't even do that. Just, watch your first employee die,
Yeah.
but trial by fire.
Exactly.
Darwinism.
That
corporate
that
Darwinism.
losses. No, but I
Which
think
employee was underperforming anyway?
you want to use that bike?
We need you to go to the other location in the same city 5 times today.
This route. So, yeah, I think in the end of the day,
really escalated quickly.
Yeah, that's right. But that's fine. It's part of it. I think entrepreneurial thinking is cool because, for example, I would say I have a quite entrepreneurial mindset, but I'm not the typical person who would start off a startup. I think maybe I could, I don't know, but I've never seen myself that way after 15 years of corporate, possibly. But I'm an entrepreneur. So I start to think what I've just discussed earlier when we met our colleague is how I can build business inside my organization and what can I sell? How do I have to set it up? What I have to consider in the pricing and all that. And this is what makes me enjoy my job, is that I can think as an entrepreneur. I can earn money if I want to. Maybe it's just not my money, it's the money of this organization, but I can think that way here. If they would just ask me to follow processes and do what they think is right, I would not work here. It's as simple as that, right? And that's why I think to support such a culture where people can just think it their own way is essential. Because, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm the best person, it's not that, but I think I'm not that in what we are changing and moving here in E.ON. And I'm staying because I can do this. I would leave the second they wouldn't allow me anymore, right? So I think just to get the right people and to have the right talent in your organization, you need to be open-minded.
To keep those people.
I mean, they kept me for 15 years. It's not that not someone else offered me a job, but there was something that was just keeping me here because I could always do my own thing. And I was very free in my decisions. There was not really someone coming and told me what to do. Or I just said, what are your framing factors? You have to hit X, and I hit X. How I hit it is my part of the job, right? So, yeah.
All right. Romina, thank you for today.
Yeah.
Let's round it off.
Yeah.
And
thank you very much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. It was a very broad set of topics.
Yeah,
so,
amazing.
Awesome.
I
hope everyone else is going to enjoy it as well.
Up to the next one.
Exactly.